right, so let's talk about levels. I'm going to open up, I'm just going to open up the architectural template here and start with that, right, which is going to be blank. For your assignment, you're going to start with the architectural template, right? Pretty simple, just so you know. All right, so we all know, we talked last time about how we can generate some very basic walls and, different things like that, navigate the drawing board of Revit. We know how to use reference planes. We know that we have to use dimensions to help us create geometry, right? And hopefully I've conveyed that when you're drawing in Revit, you don't always get the object that you're drawing the right size the first time, right? So when I draw something, I will a lot of times just get the general shape of something, and then I will use dimensions or whatever to help me get it the exact size that it needs to be, right? Which is somewhat different than AutoCAD, right? Okay, so we know how to draw a few basic things, but what I'd like to do today is talk about how we define and constrain walls, and then how we set up levels, right? So the first thing we're going to do, I'm just going to draw with my wall tool. Just going to draw a couple of little walls here. Oop, maybe, right? Draw a couple of little walls here. So we've got just a basic little structure, has a little bit of, there we go. Okay, fancy, right? All right. So I want you to pay attention to a few things here. We have a drawing here, and we have an elevation marker north, east, south, and west, right? If I double click on the north elevation marker, the head of it, that little triangle, click, click, it takes me to the north elevation, right? So there's that little building that I generated. Ooh, oh, we don't need that, do we? There we go. Okay. So what we're seeing here is the geometry on the north elevation, right? And if I select it, we're seeing some temporary dimensions happening. They're temporary dimensions in the vertical direction, right? When we were in our floor plan view, we were seeing temporary dimensions in the floor plan view. We're seeing the same things happen in elevation view, right? Some other things that you may notice here are we have these data markers, right? And these data markers are marking heights in our Revit model, okay? This level 1 and level 2 that we have, they are generated by default by Revit when you start a project with the architectural template, right? So they're just there when you open the project, okay? What I want you to bring to your attention is that level 1 right here, right? That corresponds to level 1 over here, okay? And level 2 here corresponds to level 2 here, right? So if I double click on this level marker, click, click, oop, not there, click, click, oop, maybe it doesn't want to go to floor plan. It takes me to level 1, okay? If I close out of my level there and I click on this, I'm going to right click on it and just hit go to level, go to floor plan. This brings me to level 2, okay? So those levels correspond to floor plans, all right? And the floor plan in these cases, let me just give you a little illustration here. This floor plan, level 1 might be at 0, 0, right? But our floor plan is actually cut about 3 feet above that, right? You guys all know how when you have a floor plan that's been generated that it's usually cut at about a 3-foot level, right? And the same thing for level 2. Although level 2 is defined at 10 feet above level 1, what I'm actually viewing in level 2 is about a 3-foot cut above level 2, okay? All right, so levels correspond to floor plans, right? And they can correspond to floor plans and also reflected ceiling plans. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that just yet though. All right, so these level markers, these data markers are only visible in a view that illustrates vertical heights, okay? So you're not going to see these in a floor plan view, but you will see them in an elevation view or a section view or a detail view that has a vertical relationship associated with it, okay? So if I'm in level 1 here, I'm actually viewing level 1, right? I'm viewing level 1 of the model, but I can't see those data markers. So in order to see those data markers, I have to come over here to a view, that gives a vertical relationship. North, click, click, okay? If I click on this level marker here, and I click slowly again, I could give this a different name. Main level. enter. Would you like to rename the corresponding views? Yes. And when I do that, main level is renamed over here as well, right? If I click on this and I right click and I choose rename, level 1, enter. Would you like to rename the corresponding views? Yes, right? So back and forth, I can rename the views if I need to. Level 1, you know, basement level, upper level, roof, whatever, you know, I need to define. I can do the same thing with level 2. Click again slowly. Upper level, enter. Would you like to rename the corresponding views? Yes. So that changed to upper level, right? So now my level 2 has changed to upper level. If I right click on it over here in the project browser, I can rename and I can call it level 2, enter, yes, enter, and it changes it back. Okay. So these views are already existing in Revit, right? I haven't created them. I'll show you how to create a new one in a minute, but I can also kind of modify what's already here, right? So if level 2, I wanted it to be 8 feet above level 1, I could click on the 10 foot, change it to 8, enter, and it's 8 foot above level 0 now, right? Or if I wanted it to go higher, like 12 foot, enter, it could be 12 foot above level 1, okay? All right, I could also move this down if I needed to, right? So here, that's how you redefine levels that are existing, okay? But how do we create brand new levels, okay? And what do these levels do exactly other than represent a floor plan? That's the question, right? Okay, if I go to architecture, my architecture tab, and I go all the way over here to the end, I see a level icon, okay? And that level icon will allow me to generate new levels. So if I click on it, click level, I have the option to draw and I have the option to pick a level. And I have the option to make a plan view, but I also have the option to uncheck that and not make a plan view when I create a level, right? And probably like maybe the biggest question I get when talking about levels is, hey, why would I not want to create a plan view, right? And the main reason is because some levels you want to illustrate a pure plan view, but some levels you may just need to reference for the height of something else. It's not necessarily a plan view, right? And what that means is maybe I have, you know, I have a main level marker, and then this is really a bad drawing. Oop, that was way too tall. I have these little stairs, and they get to a landing, right? And then maybe they go up a little bit more, and then they go up to the second level, right? Well, there are going to be times where maybe I need a marker that sort of designates where that landing, that stair landing is, right? But I don't need a whole floor plan for that one stair landing. But I do need to maybe measure things off of it. And so I'll create levels, right, to define specific architectural elements, right, but not floor plans. Whereas here, this is maybe floor plan 01, right, and here is floor plan 02, right? And I definitely need a full plan view for each of these floor plans, but this, you know, I will usually name it something like, well, this is, yeah, we'll do it lowercase, like stair landing or something, right? Something to that effect, okay? So that I know that, number one, it's just a datum, and there's something else we can do to illustrate that it's not a full floor plan, just a marker to measure things off of, okay? So that would be a reason why I create a level without a floor plan associated with it, okay? All right, so if I want to make a plan view, I just make sure that's checked, great. Offset, okay? The offset is going to be, you know, how far away from, you know, whatever level I want to offset from do I want this new level to be generated at? And maybe I'll say something like 10 foot, right? If I use the draw line, I can click here, and do you see how it starts generating as I kind of run my mouse? I clicked and I run my mouse along level 2. It starts generating a level above that. It gives it a default name, level 3, and it's 10 feet above level 2. 10 feet above level 2, that offset, right? I can also use a pick line, where I click pick, and I hover over this level, and it's going to generate a new brand new level, 10 feet above whatever I pick, right? So click, and it creates a new level. All right. Let me create a fourth level. Click, level. I'm going to use a pick. It's going to be maybe a 1 foot offset, and I don't want to make a plan view this time, right? You'll notice here that when I created level 3, now I have level 1, level 2, and level 3. And if I double click on any one of these 3, Revit will take me to that level, and it will be a full floor plan view, okay? If I click uncheck, make a plan view, and I have an offset of 1 foot, and maybe I, click and make level 4, because I had make plan view unchecked, you notice that level 4 is not created. Okay. We can tell the difference between these levels because levels that have a full floor plan associated with them are blue, and levels that are just a data marker, right, to measure something else off of, those are associated with a black marker. Okay. I can click on a level and I can hit delete, and it goes away. Okay. I can also copy levels. I can click on a level and I can click on copy, click, 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 and I can make a copy. But when I make a copy, it doesn't create a plan view with it, right? So you just have to be aware of what you want to do, right? I'm going to hit undo and undo that. So what good are these levels, right? What are they going to do for me? Let's talk about that. All right, I'm going to go to level 1. Click, click. All right. I have all these walls here in my level 1. And I'm just going to pick one of these walls. And, well, hold on. Let me go into a 3D view. WT, window tile. I want to have my 3D view right there. Oop. Okay. And here's my floor plan view. But WT. You have to have a couple windows open and you type WT on the command line, and that will tile your windows. Very nice, right? So I have a 3D view open, and over here in my floor plan level 1, I have selected a wall. All right. Now that wall, if I look at the properties of that wall, and I want to remind you that we have a project browser over here, and I also have a properties dialog box, or tool palette, I guess I should call it, over here. Okay. When I select an item in my floor plan view, the item that is selected, all of the properties for that item will show up here. All right. So I have this northern wall selected, and I look over here at the properties, and it says that that's a basic wall. It's generic 8-inch, right? And the location line of that wall is its center line, which means that as I drew it, right, it was measuring from the center line. And we talked about how we can change that if we want to. And it also tells me some things about where that wall starts and where it stops. Okay, so it tells me that the base constraint of that wall is at level 1. And it tells me that the top constraint of that wall is unconnected. And right here below that, it says that it's 20 feet tall. Okay, so right now, as I look at these walls, I'm going to go over to a north elevation here. And if I were to click on one of these, you see a temporary dimension pops up that says 20 feet. And it does show me that the base constraint is level 1, and it goes 20 feet tall, right? Okay. If I want to change that, I can. So I'm going to pull up another window here. Let's get that north window, and I'm going to WT, and I'm going to have both of those on the craziness, right? I'm going to pull these in just a tiny bit. These levels have a few things that you can do visually to help them lay on your drawings better. If I select it, I get that little open bubble right there at the head of that. And if I click on it and I hold it, my mouse, and I move in the direction, whatever direction I want to go, and I let go, it will drag those levels in towards the building or whatever I'm drawing, right? And you'll notice that if I drag one, generally speaking, it drags all of them to keep them in line. Aaron's laughing, right? Like, it's magic, right? It all lines up so nicely. Revit has an understanding of our need for order, right? So all of those levels line up, right? So I click on this, I have that little open bobble, right? And I can drag these back and forth with that. Something you'll also notice is I have a little elbow right here, and if I hover over it and I click, it allows that the head of that to move up or down, right? So if this were interfering with a level marker above it or something, I could drag it down so that they wouldn't obscure one another, right? I would click on that little grip, drag it down, let go, and there you go. Okay. One final thing you're going to notice over here is this little checkbox. If I click that, the marker goes away, right? And if I move over in this direction, I can turn it on this side or off. Personal preference, I kind of like to have it just on one side or the other, right? But you can do whatever you want. You see our little open bubble there. I click and I hold, and I drag those back over towards my elevation. Okay. But what I want to do here is show you how these levels can constrain these walls. So I'm going to click this outer wall here, and I'm going to look at its properties, of course, and I'm going to see that the base constraint is at level 1. Yes. And I'm going to see the top constraint is unconnected and 20 feet. Yes. But I want my walls to be constrained so that if I have to change the height of my levels or alter them, that a relationship is developed between the level and the top or bottom of the wall, so that if one moves, they flex together, right? They have that parametric relationship. So if I move one, it coordinates the movement with the other, right? So instead of the top constraint of my wall being unconnected, I'm going to change it with this drop down to level 3. So that wall, that outer wall right there, do you see how it has bumped itself up, right? And now when I pick it, it says the top constraint is level 3. Okay. So if I want all of my walls to do that, go up to level 3 and be constrained by level 3, I can hover over here in my floor plan, tab once, click. That selects all the walls at the same time, right? We want to do all these things at the same time if we can. I come over here, base constraint, level 1, top constraint, click, level 3. And very nicely, they all come up and reside at level 3. If I wanted all those to reside at level 2, I could come over here in my floor plan, and I could also actually do this in my 3D view if I wanted. I could hover, and you'll notice, and I do this a lot in Revit, something you'll have to get used to. Selections in Revit, I think are better done at an edge, right? What I mean by that is, do you see how when I hover over the plain field of that outside wall that I don't get a blue even hint of selection, right? But if I hover up near the edge, you see how it highlights, right? You're going to start noticing that when we do floors and roof planes and ceilings, that when you click in the center of it, click, 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 nothing happens. But the second I approach an edge, then I start getting that selection a lot easier, okay? So I'm going to hover up near the edge, tab, click, and you notice that all of those walls selected again. And I can come over here to my top constraint drop down, click, level 2. And all those drop down to level 2. Okay. If I wanted to, right, you'll notice that I have a base constraint and a top constraint, but I also have a top offset and a base offset. If for whatever reason this wall needed to extend below level 1, but I still wanted it associated with level 1, I could give it an offset, right? Or I could give it like a negative offset or a positive offset, right? So if maybe I had a little concrete curb that this wall was sitting on and it needed to be 6 inches above that level 1, but I still needed it associated with level 1, I could give it a base offset, you know, maybe 6 inches. Oh, what did I do? See? And it hikes it up just a little bit, 6 inches, okay? I could also change that back to 0, enter. I could change the top offset to something like, you know, let's do 1 foot, enter. And you notice that it jumps up a foot, okay? So I can constrain these, but there's a little bit of customization that can happen. I can give them a top and bottom constraint, but say, hey, except I want it, you know, in this instance to be 6 inches above that level or whatever it needs to be, right? Okay, so I'm going to grab all these again, and I'm gonna hover, and it doesn't matter if I'm in the 3D view, if I'm in the floor plan view. I don't think I'll be able to, well, I might be able to hover and tab and click. Yep, I could do it in elevation, I just can't see it, right? I'm going to change the top constraint back to level 3. And I'm going to take my top offset away to 0. And now we have this relationship where these walls are all connected at the base at level 1 and at the top level 3. Right, so now these elements all have a relationship with one another. So if I were to change this level 3 from 22 feet, if I click on the level, click again, to 15 foot, enter, all of those walls come down with it, right? If I change level 2 down to 4 foot, enter, well, that didn't do anything because nothing was connected to it. We'll undo that. We'll change this level back to, 25, enter. All of those walls go with it. If I take my level 1 and I MV, which I can move these if I need to, I don't have to just click on the dimension. Click, click, I move it down. Now that level, all of that base constraint moves down with it. 0, enter, and there we go. So levels are pretty important in definition of walls, okay? Now, one thing that you're gonna, maybe I'll just kind of talk you through this, right, and think about. When you look at this, right, and let me pull up actually maybe a north view as well. If we were creating a residential home, right, this is where I think a lot of the beginning design students struggle because you don't have any real world knowledge in general, right? And so definition of these elements to be correct construction wise or thinking about correct datums is really kind of difficult, okay? So we'll do the best we can, but this is where you really have to pay attention to your levels and what kind of things happen in a real project, right? Because if you think about this home, you're going to have, let's say this is your main level and you enter just right from level 1, right? So you enter at level 0. You can step on into your house, there's no stairs or anything. But if you think about it, right, your walls go up to a certain point and then you have a ceiling, but what do you have above the ceiling? Floor joists if there's a second level, right, or roof joists or whatever, right? So we'll have maybe like the top of wall, and then we'll have a space where we have joists, and then we have the top of the joist is really going to be kind of the top of the second level floor, right? And then potentially we could have another level that goes up to a certain point, and then we have another roof structure, whether it's trusses or joists or whatever, right? And then above that we have a roof, right? So we really don't just have, when we're thinking about floor plans, level 1, level 2, and then the roof. We have, level 1, and then potentially the bottom of the joist, and then level 2, and then, the top of the wall of level, which would be level 3 here in our case. And then we have the roofing, the roof up above, which could be 25 feet above that, or whatever, right? Maybe not 25 feet. But it would be, 10 feet above that or something, okay? So right now you're like, well, big deal, we'll just draw it without those things and who cares, right? But we're establishing elements in here that have relationships to other elements, and we're going to have to put a ceiling in, right? And the ceiling, we're going to say in general, speaking very generally, the ceiling will attach to the bottom of the joists of that main level, right? Then you'll have your joists, and then you'll have your other floor, and then the ceiling of the second level will attach to the bottom of the joist of that second level, very generally speaking, right? So you have to have these datums, and you have to have these levels that mark all of these elements within this building to create other elements of the building, the floors, the stairs, the ceilings, the roof, all of these things, okay? It's good and bad, because when you're first starting out with this, you don't know a whole lot, right? So you kind of guess at a lot of things. But I think it's good in that, it really presents a lot of the problems actually that happen in a building, right? So you're kind of really constructing a little model of the building that's going to be built, and you have to think about everything, and you see every condition, and you have to deal with it in digital form before it's actually, constructed, which I think is really good, right? Okay, so let's talk about, if we have, let's go into a 3D mode here. If we have, and let me just say this, we're not going to be able to learn all the tools simultaneously, right? We're going to learn about levels and walls, and we're going to draw levels and walls. And then in a few weeks, we'll probably learn about floors because we have some other things in between those two topics, right? And so it's good in that you'll have to make a few changes later on. And Revit's all about changes, and it makes it pretty easy. So we're going to define things the best we can. And then we're going to go back later on and add floors and elements, and we're going to change the levels and add levels and subtract levels and do different things to the model to make it work, okay? So immediately our model's not going to be totally correct, and we're going to be missing some elements, and we're going to have to change some things. So just know that up front, okay?
Tell me again how you made the second level
Yeah.
on the elevation view.
So first thing, we had to go to a view where it showed that, where it revealed it, right? So I went to a north view, and you're asking how I changed this level?
How you made the, like, you know, if you put the floors too close to each other, like overlapping, how did you bend those?
Okay, so let's add a level, right? I go to level, I'm going to create another level, and we'll make it, you know, 1 foot below level 2, click, and they're overlapping clearly, right? I click on level 5, and I'm gonna grab that little elbow, click, and it bumped it out. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep. So what we're gonna do here as we start to build our little house is we'll probably put in the appropriate levels for all of the things that we need, and we might be missing some elements, but we're gonna leave maybe a little bit of space for a joist here, right? Or in the basement, we'll leave a little bit of space for those floor joists, but we won't put them in. So we'll have little blank areas where floors are going to go eventually, but we'll plan for them. Okay. Any questions so far about levels? Okay. Everything in general. Oh, yep.
I have like one question, like when we changing the level, like should we change it in all, like north, south, or only one?
If you change it in one place, it does it in every instance. Yeah. So that's what's really nice about Revit, right? This was 25 feet here. I change it to 22 foot, right? And then I go to east, oh, south, oh, west, and it's all changed. It's all coordinated.
Like in one side, but like my back wall is taller than
Than the others? All right, so what's happening there is you've picked all of your walls and you've defined the base constraint and the top constraint, right? Except you left one out. So if you repick that wall, I bet that its definition at the base constraint and the top constraint are not the same as the others. So you have to pick it and just make sure everything is the same. Okay, so levels are not too bad, right? Well, hopefully everybody kind of gets the idea behind levels, right? Makes sense. Any questions? Tab to select them all. Yep. Right. So I can tab and select all of these. Click. And if I accidentally leave one of these out, right? I left one out like that, and I redefine these to be from level 1 to level 2. Oh, you did the same thing. Yep. So I grab that one, right? And I come over here and I say, oh, I want it to be to level 2, and it fixed it.
How did you select all of them?
I hovered over one. I just hover, and I before I click, I don't click yet. I tab, and then I click. And anything that's connected will select. Yep.
So if you select any partition, how do you, like, say, split the wall in half, right? Like, you set a partition and make one wall higher. How do you split this?
How do you split them?
Yeah.
So we're going to go to, let's go to level 2. So we're going to split the wall using the split tool. I'm going to go into 3D here, and we'll do a window tile here. So let's say I want half of this wall to go up high and half of this wall to stay low, right? Which is pretty common. I'm going to, in floor plan view, I'm going to go to modify walls, and I'm going to come over here to split. Okay, click. And I'm going to come to my wall, and I'm going to determine where that needs to occur. Click. Now by doing that, you notice that it creates a little split right there, right? So I can click on, oop, let me go to level 1, sorry. Oop. Let's do this. Here we go. So I split that wall, so now that portion of it I can redefine from level 1 to level 3. right? And I get a difference there.
You can make an offset, make it, and go flat all the way to level two.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
once you do that split, it treats it as two different partitions.
It does. Yep. So I can make it even a different wall type, right? If that one's going to be stone and the one next to it's going to be brick, I can give it two different wall types, two different base and top constraints. Yep. Because they look like they look like they're still together. Yeah, but they're different at this point. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about interior walls versus exterior walls, right? The way that Revit, and for now, let's do a little drawing here again. Okay. Okay, the way that we're going to work with our Revit walls, and we'll keep it really simple for now. Let's say we have an exterior wall, you know, have a little foundation on it. Here's our exterior wall, right? And we're gonna have another exterior wall over here. And there's going to be in the basement, ooh, that's big and thick right there. There's going to be a floor slab in there, right? And then the main level, you have another floor coming in here, right? And then these will be shortened. We'll just put a few in there. There we go. And then maybe we have a roof. This is maybe more of a commercial type thing, right? We have a roof right here. Now, if this were something like a wood framed wall or whatever, you know, you have to pay attention in Revit to how these floors are going to interact with our walls, right? Because they don't really just kind of float in between our wall systems, right? They're going to come into the wall system and at a certain point, right, they're going to interact, okay? For now, I just want to bring this point up because for the first several weeks, things are not going to quite look right, you know? We'll work through it. They will eventually work right. But I want to let you know that you're going to create exterior walls. Eventually we're going to create floors, but we're also going to create interior walls, right? And interior walls will start here at the floor and they'll go up to the bottom of the structure. Right? They'll generally look like that. And our floor will sit in there, it'll stop there, right? And this floor system will likely come into the wall at a certain point or whatever, you know. And we can get Revit to make things look like this, but it's not going to look quite right for us. Okay? We'll have some walls that maybe go like this, right there and there. We have little tiny short walls. Those like that, right? But in general, when we're drawing our walls, okay, and we have a residence that we're doing first, so this isn't a huge, and it's a one-level residence, so it's not a big deal. But the way that our walls are going to function is our exterior walls are going to go from kind of the lowest base constraint, right, wherever that may be, unless we have to change wall type, all the way up to the roof, okay? In our little houses, we'll have a foundation wall here that will stop here, I guess, if I spoke a little bit too soon. But for the rest of it, even if this were maybe 10 stories tall, this exterior wall will start at a certain point and it will go all the way up until it terminates, okay? And I guess maybe my point with that is I think when students are new at this, they tend to think it goes from level 1 to level 2, and then level 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4, and then 4 to 5, right? But what we're going to do with our exterior walls is they're going to be continuous to where they need to terminate, like a foundation goes from here to here, right? And then this upper wall goes from here to here. Our interior walls will start at an interior point, likely, you know, the top of that slab right there. See how we're starting to get a few different levels here, right? And they'll go all the way up to probably the underside of the structure. Okay, and we'll have a few more datums that come up here. Does that somewhat make sense? So exterior walls, they span from floor to floor, however tall they need to be. Interior walls go from floor to bottom of structure, generally. You might have some, maybe a little pony wall in here, right? Somebody has a desk or whatever, and they want a little short wall. At that point, that wall would go from the floor up to, or you could have it unconnected. That would be 4 foot tall unconnected, or whatever it ends up being, okay? So just keep in mind, you know, things might not look right, but we are going to have systems work like this. Okay. All right, so does the idea of defining walls and levels somewhat make sense? Yep.
So, question for those interior walls. So, let's say the basement interior walls. So it goes from top of the slab to the bottom of the, of that joist, and then we have ceiling and whatever.
Yes.
So mark that datum point?
Yes.
The bottom of that,
Yes,
so that we can tell it to go from this to this level?
yes, yes. He's a figure, he likes to figure it out, right? We've already talked about this. He's a figure it out guy, right? So yes, that's a very good point. So here, right, we'd have something like this datum would be bottom of structure, right? And this one would be something like level 1. And then this would be bottom of structure level 2, right? And this would be level 2, right? And so for each floor, we're going to have a level that marks bottom of structure. And we have to have a level because we have to define, you know, the walls to go from here to there, not from here to there. So yeah, you'll have a couple of levels or a couple of data markers for each level. And then the roof, of course, and then down here. And actually,
So walls are only height-wise constrained with levels?
yeah.
It doesn't matter if something is in between and is gonna conflict with it?
What do you mean in between?
Well,
Like
in this
this?
instance, like if we put like, let's say base of the wall is the basement slab,
Right?
and then we just say go to level 1.
Right.
And it's gonna go through the joint.
Yes.
So-
Yeah. So you're defining it. So Revit doesn't really care what it's defined as, right? You could take this wall and define it to level 1, and it would essentially show like that in a building section, showing it going to level like that, which is not how it's going to work, right? It's going to stop right there, and it will function like that. But Revit will do whatever you want as a definition. Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. So let's look at walls, right? And how we're going to define these a little bit better. I'm going to go to a north elevation here, right? And I look at this and I'm going to define a few, well, we've defined, let's call this our exterior wall, okay? So WT, I've got my good old 3D model here, my elevation, and my floor plan. So if I go to my floor plan, I hover and I tab, click, I select all of the walls, and we'll call these our exterior walls. They're our outside walls, okay? So I'm going to define these walls to go from level 1 all the way up to level 2. Nope, level 3. Level 3. There you go, okay? So right with that move, I've kind of effectively defined my exterior envelope, right? So we've defined the exterior envelope correctly, meaning it goes from here all the way up to where it terminates, right? That's our wall system. Now, if I wanted to draw some interior walls, right? I have a level 1 floor plan and I have a level 2 floor plan, okay? Let's talk about how we're going to do that. And, you know, of course, we're not going to have our floors in there just yet because we don't know how to create floors, but we're going to plan a little bit ahead thinking we eventually will have floors, okay? So I'm going to name these levels something a little different. I'm going to leave this as level 1. That will be level 2. I'm going to call this, instead of level 5, I'm going to click on it, click again slowly, and I'm going to call this bottom of structure. Yes. Right, and I'm going to come up here, and instead of this being level 3, because that confuses me, I think, oh, there's a third level, when really there's not. I'm going to call this, and there's nothing above this, it will be a roof above this, okay? I'm going to call this top of wall. Now, you'll see me, I've gotten into these habits, you know, after working for so long in industry, but I've gotten into the habit of, and I didn't do it here very well, but anything that is a level, that is, you know, specifically a floor plan view, I will capitalize the name of it. So this is level 1 and it's caps. Okay, this is level 2 and it's caps. I like to do that because visually over here in my project browser, I know those are kind of those true floor plan levels because they're capitalized, right? And I know that the other levels that are maybe in small, in lowercase, right? I'm either using those as a datum, well, essentially as a datum, you know, but I had to have a floor plan with them. So bottom of structure and then top of wall here, okay? So that's how I go about naming and distinguishing, you know, things in my project browser, which right now, when you don't have a lot in there, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you have 20 floor plans in there for varying things that you're doing, it gets kind of complicated, right? So I like to stay organized from the beginning. Before I go any further with this though, I look at this and I'm gonna come down here to my visual settings, and I look and I see that this is 1/8 of an inch. You know, and I think to myself, 1/8 of an inch? Well, maybe I actually want that to be 1/4 of an inch. And I change it to 1/4 of an inch. Nothing really very much visually happened, but it changed to 1/4 of an inch. And it scaled my annotation to be correct. Okay. So I want to remind you about annotation, and I'll remind you about scaling and how we do all those different things as we move through this. Okay. I have my floor plan level 1 here. I know it's my floor plan level 1 here. I'm going to come down. Oh, yeah, that's right. No, I was looking at that thinking it didn't change the, hold on, I did something bad, right? I changed the other one. I was thinking to myself, the annotation really didn't jump. It didn't give me a, there we go. That's what I was looking for to happen. It changed the scale of it, right? So it's smaller now, right? And that's 1/4 of an inch. This is 1/4 of an inch. What happened there was, in my mind, I was looking for this visual visual graphics toolbar at the bottom of my screen, not remembering that or thinking about how I'd split my screen there. I'm going to come over here to my floor plan, and yep, I'm going to do the same thing, 1/4 of an inch. Yep, per view. Right, yep, it's per view that those things happen. Okay, so I have this changed to 1/4, this changed to 1/4. I've got all my levels in there. Looks the way that I want it to. Let's talk about creating some interior partitions, right? I've created a bunch of exterior walls, but what happens when I want to generate some interior walls on the main level, level 1, okay? So I'm going to go to level 1, click, and I want to create some more walls in here. So I'm going to go and initiate my wall tool. Architecture, wall. Okay. And I've had this generic 8-inch wall selected to create my exterior wall. Well, I don't need a wall that thick for my interior wall. So let's talk about how we change wall types. Okay. If I initiate the wall command, WA, or I click on the wall icon or the wall tool, I'm going to drop down here. And you'll notice we have a bunch of different interior walls that we could use. Okay. These have all been defined within the architectural template. So they're just in there when you start a new project, okay? Using the architectural template. I'm gonna, instead of the generic 8-inch, I'm gonna grab maybe, we're gonna be crazy and grab the generic 4-inch brick. Inside the house, right? And we're gonna draw some interior partitions with that, so inside walls, right? Now I'm on level 1. I can see I'm on level 1. I can browse over here and make sure I'm on level 1 because it's highlighted in bold. And now, since I have my wall command active, right, I can define the top and bottom constraints of where that wall is going to live, okay? This wall is just going to be kind of that level 1 floor plan. And so my walls, right, they're going to start, let's say this is level 1 right here, right? They're going to start at whatever floor I have designated, and they're just going to go up to the bottom of the joist or the ceiling, okay? So if I think about that, my walls are going to go from level 1 at the base up to bottom of structure, right? And then eventually when we get to floors, we'll put a floor plate in there, and then level 2 walls will be defined from level 2 up to top of wall. Kind of make sense? See how complicated Revit is? This right here, I mean, and it's good because you're thinking through it, you know, you're making sure things are correct. This is why the front half of a Revit project is very labor intensive. It's front loaded, right? You're spending a lot more time with all of this definition than if you had worked in AutoCAD for sure, right? So I just like to point that out for those of you going into industry, you know, having used Revit or AutoCAD or whatever, right? Running your projects, the timetable will be different, right? It just will. Okay, so let me start my wall command again. I got my brick. Okay, I'm going to define this wall to go from level 1 all the way up to bottom of structure. Okay, and when I do this, hopefully, if I've done everything right, we'll be able to see it all happen simultaneously here. Okay, so I can come here, click, click, and there's my little wall generated very nicely, right? Wall. Did you say that's, I know, right? And I can come up here, click, click, and click, click, and click, click, right? And I'm just defining all these little death trap rooms, right? Click, click, there we go, click, click. And if we wanted, we can even grab this wall, zoom in, grab that little grip, drag it all the way down here. Maybe we create a hallway that goes all the way down there, right? Okay, I'm going to click on that wall, and I'm going to come up here to copy, copy, and let's make a little hallway. Click, and then you see my pink object snap, which is the endpoint snapped. Drag it down to here, snap again, click, and it creates a little hallway. Oh, I don't like how that wall has been drawn at the midpoint of there, so I'm going to use a line, right? AL, or I can go to modify and go to, where is it? I never use the icons. Right there, AL, AL, click there, click. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. AL, yeah, oh no, that is, yeah. Click, click, and align that wall, right? And very nicely, all of these walls are very nice and they stay joined, right? Looks great. Okay, I'm going to split these walls, SL, or I can use the split tool right here. Click, split, 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 and maybe we even split that one for fun. I'm going to split that wall, and I'm going to trim, TR, click, click, and it trims that up. Well, we probably don't need that little guy anymore. Delete, right? And I don't like how those walls line up, so AL, align, click, click, those little guys line up. Okay. But, you know, I'm probably not going to get the cleanest trim, just trimming all these, because this wall will be affected, right? If I go TR, trim, click, click, do you see how it kind of kills that, the rest of that? That's okay for what we're doing right now. But I could also align, AL, click, click, right? Let me show you another little trick with align, AL. I have multiple alignment, okay? Click. Now I can set a boundary, click, and I can, ooh, this might not work as well as I'd hoped. I should have split with a gap. Not even that. You see how the overlap of the, you know, that end boundary is very thick and I can't see where they're kind of, what's happening. I'm going to go up to, what's that? You like AutoCAD better? All right, you maybe have 1 point. I'm going to click on thin lines and I'm going to make those a little bit easier to see the end boundary, right? I could drag those up a little. Okay, or I could have split with a gap and it would have left a gap there and that would have made my life a little bit easier, right? So I'm going to align, AL, click, and now very clearly I can align, align, escape, escape, AL, align, click, and I can align, click, align, click, right? Trim, TR, okay, but I probably don't need that. Click, delete, and oop, that needs to be aligned a little bit better. AL, click, click, okay. We don't have any doors or windows. Oop, there's another little AL, align, click, click. They line up very nicely, right? And as you're watching this, you could see everything that we just did perfectly coordinated here, right? Which is really nice. So we have this nice little building and it's all sectioned off. We'll put doors in here, of course, right? But everything looks pretty good for now. And, you know, this outer wall, these outer walls go from level 1 up to top of wall. And these inner walls go from level 1 up to bottom of structure. Here, let me really amaze you, those of you that have worked with AutoCAD and industry, right? How long does it take to draw a building section? Generally speaking, a long time, right? And there's a lot of coordination back and forth. I'm gonna draw a quick building section here. There's my section tool, click. And I wanna look at all of these, how all of these walls are interacting right now. Click, click. And when I inserted that section symbol, the section symbol is looking, you know, northern, it's looking up that direction. we won't go over sections very much other than just to use them to help us view things right now. But the section, this blue region, is the extent of the section. You're going to notice that after I added that section, I get a sections area in my project browser. Click, I open it up, section number 1, click, click. There's my building section. Do you like Revit better now, Noor? The building section tool. Okay. It's such a time saver, right? So this is really nice, right? So my walls, I can very clearly see how they're interacting with my levels, and everything looks really good so far. I could grab this bottom of structure, click, click again very slow, and I could make this 8 foot if I wanted, enter. And because I have defined that base constraint and that top constraint, right, there's a relationship formed, and I change one thing and it changes everything associated with that, right, which is really nice. This is my crop region, of course, right? I can drag my crop region in and out. I keep saying these things because there are so many settings in Revit to learn that I feel like whenever I see a setting, right, I want to mention it so that you remember that there are these settings and that you can change them and alter them. So I can grab these, bring them in, and you will, you know, it's habit from having worked for so long in industry, but you will see me the second I look at this plan, right, or this section, I'm bringing the elevation marker or the elevation markers in, I'm changing the crop region, I'm scaling it to the right scale, and we don't have to do sheets, but if we did, I would get ready to print, right, because without fail, a client's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, can you print off a quick floor plan for me? Or can you print off a quick section for me? And it just took me 2 minutes to get it nice and neat and orderly and cropped correctly, and I'm ready to print, right? So if somebody comes in and says, hey, can you print this real quick? Sure, I've got it ready to go, right? Because I took a second to kind of make it nice when I generated it. So you'll see me kind of just out of habit sort of getting these ready for someone else to come and, you know, look at. So my crop region, I can come down here and I can hide the crop region, right? Very nicely. Okay, I'm going to close out of that section. My section marker's still there. Let's look at our second level walls, okay? In general, the level that you're on is going to be, by default, the base level of whatever you're drawing, right? So I wanted to draw walls on level 1 to level 2, or to bottom of the structure, right? And so I went to level 1 because I wanted level 1 to be that base constraint, right? You can, you know, be on level 2 and draw walls from level 1, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just easier if you kind of work with the system, right? So I wanted to draw walls from level 1 to bottom of structure, which I changed. Let's change that back to 11 foot. Here we go. Okay. So now when I want to draw walls on level 2, the upper level, I'm going to change my floor plan from level 1 to level 2 by double clicking on level 2. Click, click. Okay. So let's see here. Oop. I'm going to, there we go. All right. Zoom extents, ZE, and it brings my drawing to the forefront. Okay. Now some things that I see happening here. I have my exterior walls still, which is great. I don't have any walls drawn on level 2, but I do have a ghosting in of the walls on level 1, right? That's called an overlay, or in this case it would be called an underlay. So Revit allows you to change a setting, and in this case I'm going to come over here, right, and look. I have an underlay section right here in my properties dialog box, and it says that the base level is level 1, but I'm actually viewing level 2 and I'm looking down. This is a little more complicated than it used to be. It used just to say underlay or no, yes or no, which I kind of like because I feel like this gets a bit confusing. But what I can do here is I can say, you know, the base level, if I want to turn the underlay off, I can choose none. And then if I choose none, it goes away, right? But at times it's nice to be able to line elements up with elements below, right? To maintain structural lines and to be able to coordinate openings and different things from other levels, right? So that feature is really nice to be able to line things up, okay? If you want to bring it back, the base level, you want to see level 1. The top level, we want to do level 2. So essentially what this is doing is it's saying you're viewing level 1 up to level 2. So you're anything within this range, you're getting a darkened view of things that are cut, the outer walls, and you're getting a lighter view of things that are that are in that range but not being cut, essentially in a floor plan view. Okay.
If you didn't want to view your floor joists, but you wanted to reference the lower level, you would just have it go up to your the bottom of the structure.
Well, you just turn it off. I would just turn it off, yeah. So in this case, if you didn't want to see those walls below, you would just come over here and I would say none, and it would go away.
If you have the view going from level 1 to level 2, then you're going to see the floor joists if there's floor joists in there.
Oh, they won't appear.
Oh,
So
they
they
won't appear.
won't appear. The floor joists won't appear. Yeah, so you'll just see your walls below. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to just turn those off because I don't really want to reference them. I want to do a totally different floor plan upstairs. And so I'm going to, now that I'm on level 2, you'll notice that when I go to start a wall command, go to architecture. Oop, what's going on? What do I have happening? Modify. There we go. Okay. Wall. I still have that generic 4-inch brick wall happening, right? If I come over here to my level 2, because I'm at level 2, Revit assumes my base constraint is level 2, which is the lowest point on this floor plan. And it's saying, well, you're going to go all the way up to top of wall, which is the next highest level, right? If there were something in between, it could define that in between as, the next highest level. And that looks pretty good, right? I don't really want to change it. So I'm going to come over here and start drawing things. So maybe we will, and oh, I remember now that it's drawing from wall center line. Do you see that? I don't want that, so I'm going to hit escape. And I'm going to change my location line from wall center line to finish face of the exterior. Now that wall will line up, finished face to finished face. If I want it to go the other direction, reorient the wall, I tap, or space bar. Okay. Move in the direction I want to go, click. You see it forming over here. I'm going to keep going until ooh, it's pretty lined up, but I don't quite know where the lineup is, so I'm going to just draw that wall, and it creates it over here, but I want to align it with that wall, so AL, click, click, right? I'm going to go back up to wall, and we can generate some more little rooms all the way, or a big long room all the way across there. And you'll notice again, right, we see that we have those walls generating on the second level. Wall, click. If I wanted to, I could change the wall type, right? If I wanted to change to a different wall, maybe there's a 2x6 wall assembly, or a 2x4 wall assembly, or a fire rated assembly, or some other type of wall that needed to be generated. Yep.
I have a question, when we don't have the walls in the level 1, and can we put a wall on the top, and how are we gonna hold it up? Like if you have a concrete wall or something?
You mean the floor? Where's the floor? How's it being held up?
Second floor.
Well, we're gonna put the floors in later. Is that what you're asking? There's a gap, and there.
Still, if you have this is the floor in this is in level 1, and this is level 2.
Uh-huh.
And on the ceiling, if you don't have a beam or something.
Oh, right. So you're asking, we're not showing structure essentially in this, right? So usually the workflow is you're going to have to show columns and architectural columns, but structural engineers have Revit structural, or whatever it's called. And so the way that it works is you give them your architectural model and they link it into their Revit structural. They put in actual structural elements, and then those show up back in your model. So the two models and the two disciplines are working together to get those elements in there. It is magic, right? It works. The system works pretty well, actually.
Yeah, really, that just sounds like the engineer's problem.
I know, right? Like, I'm just designing
I'm
it.
not trying to do his job.
I don't really
I'll
care.
doodle, but, you know,
I don't really care how it's held up. Right?
I'm the doodler.
You can plan for those kind of things. We do have, let me just say this, comparing this to AutoCAD, right? In AutoCAD, for you to define architectural elements, meaning you define and place them, you use layers that are called AE-wall. AE meaning architectural, right? And a structural engineer will use layers like SE wall, right? So what you're doing is you are essentially placing all of these things there on an AE or an architectural discipline definition, right? So we can place columns, we can place beams that we, you know, hey, maybe it would be great if there has to be a beam, it needs to be here. We can place them architecturally, and we make it an architectural element, right? That the engineers can then reference and agree or disagree and place structural elements where they need to go, essentially, within theirs.
What if they put it on the spot?
Yeah.
What if it's not aesthetically pleasing?
Right. Well, it's a discussion then at that point, because you open your model and you see theirs and you're like, we don't want a column right in the middle of the space, so how are we going to make it work? Yeah. Revit's really good at identifying issues like that, so you very clearly see where those things happen, right? In AutoCAD, where it's 2D, sometimes you miss it, and you just miss it. It's easy to do, but in Revit, it's a lot more evident. Okay, so we've got all of these, right, walls going from level 2 up to top of wall, and I'm just going to create, we'll just create a few more, right, talking about definition, of course. Here they go, and they're all just, you know, plopping in here. And we'll do one more right there. Okay, looks good. So now, when I look at my model, right, it looks a little bit weird because there's a gap where the floor is going to eventually go. But I have walls that are very nicely defined from level 1 up to bottom of structure. And I have walls that go from level 2 up to top of wall, which is great. And I have an exterior wall that is defined from its base level all the way up to its top level, right? So that looks pretty good to me. Any questions so far? Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything here. Okay. That looks good. Okay. All right. So, I'm debating because the next topic that we have to discuss is pretty large. And I'm wondering, I think you have enough to maybe start. Yeah, let's do that. Let's begin the topic, and then we'll finish it because I think I have next. Let me look at our schedule here. I'm pretty sure I have 2 classes devoted to the idea of walls because it's a big topic. Let me just look at the schedule real quick. We don't need to be getting behind, right? Okay, the 24th. Oh yeah, we're actually a little bit ahead. Okay, levels. Oh, grids. Okay. I don't want to.
Skip it.
I know. Dang it. I'm gonna skip grids, and we're gonna go to walls a little bit. Grids are for engineers, right? Let's just introduce the idea of editing walls and defining wall types. Okay, so we've been able to define the walls, right? We've defined a base constraint, we've defined top constraints. We recognize that we have to remember interior building systems like floors or roof systems, right? We have to recognize that walls, you know, start at certain points and stop at certain points inside. Okay. I think the next logical thing, we'll talk about grids. I think next time will make a little bit more sense, actually. But let's talk about walls and how we define wall systems, okay? Because sort of the beauty of Revit is that inherent information that we have and how we can extract and use that information, you know, throughout the process, right? If I grab a wall and I click on it like that, I come over here to my properties dialog box, I'll notice that I have, this says basic, generic 8-inch wall. Right, great. If I click on this down arrow, of course we have a bunch of other types of walls that we have defined here. We have a foundation wall, we have an exterior brick on metal stud, and if I click on that, you notice that that wall plumps up, right? It's a little bit thicker, and I see brick on one side. If I orbit about, rotate around, I see what's likely gypsum board on the other side. This wall is evidently flipped the wrong direction. But I'm able to change these wall systems, right? I'm able to define them according to what they're actually built from, okay? If I go to a floor plan view, which I'm going to go to a main level floor plan view, level 1, right? I can definitely see there's a difference in those two wall systems. Now, I don't see all of the construction of that wall. I don't see all the striations, right? Another setting, if you remember down here, I have a coarseness where I can click detail level and I can choose fine. Click. Okay. And by changing the coarseness level, I'm able to view more detail with regard to objects in my floor plan. So if I click on that wall, right, I can see the bricks on the inside. I want to reorient it, so I click on change the wall's orientation, click, and it puts the brick on the outside of the wall. Great. Okay. All right, so I can click this wall, and I can also change it to whatever that was called. BRI, that filters out the brick wall types, brick on metal stud, click and I change it. And for whatever reason, right, it's flipping it, so I flip it again. Great. So I can change my wall by grabbing the wall and using the drop down, okay? If I know that I need to change all of these exterior walls, I can hover, tab, click, grab them all at the same time, and I can use my wall drop down to change them all from, this wall type to the second wall type, of course, which I'm not going to do yet. Yep. When it was in place, I clicked on it, and these little grips pop up. You can also use a space bar. Yep. Now, this wall, do you notice it flipped about its location line, right? That midpoint. If this had been, if the location line had been the finished face exterior, do you see that? And right? It's going to flip about that location line. So it seems like such a small thing, but you really have to pay attention to it. Okay? Which that just right there solved a problem we were having last semester. Okay, anyway, off topic, but we're having some weirdness going on last semester, and I think that was just what was wrong. Anyway, okay, so we have our walls. I can grab a wall and I can use this drop down. Revit also has what's called a match properties, right? AutoCAD has a match properties where if there's an existing item in your drawing and you want to take another item and match it to that existing item, match properties will allow you to do that, okay? And it's MA. It is MA, and I'm like, where's the icon? I'm trying to remember where the icon is. I think it's under modify. I honestly can't remember. Let's Google it. MA. There's no reason to go find it. Match properties. Let's see. Match type properties. Where's my find? Modify clipboard panel. Okay, so modify. I was in the right area. Clipboard. Oh, there it is. Okay. MA. Okay. So what MA will allow you to do, MA, is click on the first object that you want to maintain. So click, and to match others to it. Click, click, and it's a continuous command. Click, click, escape, 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 right? So MA, click on the object you want, and click the other objects that you want to match to it. Of course, they're all the wrong directions. I have to click on them, and I wonder if I can do those all at the same time. Nope, I can't. Oop. But I can click and reorient them very quickly. Hopefully they're still the correct dimensions I want them to be, right? But you guys get the idea. So I can match properties. I would say in general you can match properties with almost with everything in Revit, right? So wall types, text and dimensions and window types and door types. You can match properties for anything, and it works pretty well. This little thing right here, do you see those two not joining very nicely? Oh, that's still flipped the other direction. There we go. Now it's very nicely joining. Okay. So I can change my wall types. I can also, what happens if I don't have a wall type defined that I need, right? So I come into create a wall, architecture wall. You're by the windows. They leak air. It's very cold over there. Yeah. If there is a wall type that is not defined in this list of wall types that I already have generated, I can create new ones. And we're just going to breeze over this topic because it's kind of intense, right? So I'll show you how to do it. And then when we meet again on Monday, we'll go in depth on this topic because it's going to take a little while, okay? But if I do want to create a new wall type, right? And this is something that you're going to see again and again and again and again in Revit, this procedure, right? In Revit, there's not a create a new wall type button, and there's not a create a new door type button. Boo, did you say boo? There should be a button. But then, I mean, yes and no, because then if it's a brand new wall, you have to define it from point 0, right? And what actually happens in Revit is you take something that is similar to what you want to create and you alter it to what you want it to be, right? So the procedure for creating new wall types in Revit is to find an existing wall type that is similar to what you want to create the new wall type out of, right? So if, for example, you want to create a 2x6 stud wall and you have a 2x4 stud wall created, you're going to grab the 2x4, copy it, rename it, redefine it, and then use it for the new wall type, right? Let me show you what that actually means, okay? So if I have a wall created, it's a brick wall. There's my 4-inch brick wall. And I want a wall type that has a wood stud associated with it. So I've got a wood stud and then I have brick next to it, okay? And I think to myself, well, you know, there's no new wall button in Revit. I'm going to find the wall type closest to the one I want to generate and I'm going to alter it. I'm going to copy it, rename it, redefine it, and then use it, okay? So I grab the closest, you know, definition. And the closest definition might not be drawn already in your floor plan. So you may have to go through and find the one you want, you know, generate it in the floor plan and then revise it. But for this case, I'm going to grab the object I want to copy. I'm going to hit edit type here. This is pretty intense, okay? So I'm going to choose duplicate up here. Duplicate. I'm going to give it a new name. Brick with 2x6 wood stud. And in fact, even before that, I'm going to give it a wall type designation, WT1, wall type 1. Okay, so I just duplicated it. So I duplicated it and I gave it a new name. Duplicate, rename, redefine. I'm going to hit under the structure. I need to redefine the structure of this. I'm going to choose edit, click. And you'll notice in the structure I just have a brick, a common brick defined as a 4-inch thick item. This is where it gets a little hairy, so don't worry about following me if you don't want to, but I can just show you what we're going to end up doing on Monday. I'm going to choose insert. I'm going to move it up. I'm going to redefine this from structure to, well, it's going to be structure, but we'll give it a different name like substrate. I'm going to choose a material. So this is going to be a wood stud. Wood studs, Douglas fir is considered a softwood, right? So they define it as a softwood lumber. Okay. I'm going to give it a thickness. Did I do a 2x4 or what did I name this? 2x6. There. 5.5 inches. Okay. Okay. And it's been redefined. Right? So now when I look at this wall type, it is the wall type 1 brick with 2x6 wood stud. It has the brick veneer on the outside here, or on the inside. On the outside, it has the wood stud on the inside, right? And again, that was accomplished by choosing a wall type that was similar to the new wall type I wanted to generate, right? Making a copy of it, renaming it, redefining it, and then using it, right? I feel like that's completely counterintuitive, honestly, because most, what's that?
Really?
I do. I feel like it was counterintuitive because I feel like in most programs, you do usually start from point 0, right? You want a new block, you go and you draw a new block. You don't go find one that's similar, explode it, redraw it, and give it a new name.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, I was like, oh, I'm going to take something that may or may not be defined quite correctly. I'm going to copy it all over the place. What if it has something completely wrong with it that is not going to function throughout my whole drawing, right? And I use it 50 more times. I'm going to copy it, rename it, redefine it, use it again, and it may or may not have integrity through the whole process. That's my thinking, right? But with that, I'm a believer now. The system works, right? And you're going to do this with everything in Revit. So walls, doors, windows, storefront, families, other components. Instead of going and creating a brand new one, you're going to grab the thing closest to whatever you want. You're going to copy it, rename it, redefine it, and then use it in your project, essentially. Once you do this, you'll do it 4 or 5 times. It will get very easy. But the hardest part of this, I think, is hitting edit type and redefining this structure, right? This gets pretty complicated. And the layers get a little finicky, and things sometimes work and sometimes they don't. So anyway, so we will talk about that on Monday, okay? So let's do this. Let me just pull up our assignment one more time. So we're actually a tiny bit ahead of where I thought we would be, so that's good. We did skip grids, so we'll have to come back to that. Really want to know grids. All right, so here's what I'd like you all to do. For your assignment, you won't be able to get through the whole thing, and you'll be able to get through a few things, but you won't be able to get through the whole thing. So what I'd like you to do is I want you to start your file, so do that. I want you to set up your drawing by creating these levels. You're not really going to be able to generate these wall types just yet. Monday you will be able to, but instead of creating these brand new, wall types right now, use some of the wall types that are already currently in Revit, right, to start generating the floor plan, all right? And I think what will be really helpful is if you can all at least start the floor plan, get a sense for what's happening in it, and then on Monday we'll talk about creating the new wall types, and I will also draw a little bit of the floor plan in class, right? So if you were stuck on something or didn't quite know how to go about it, we'll go over it in class to get you moving on it.
Yeah. I like that sort of confidence.
I think you can do it. You can do it. You can do it, right? It'll be great. It'll be great. Okay. It's perfectly all right. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.